I want to start by saying thank you to Emily. She's here somewhere. If you want to put your hand up a moment, there she is, who's done amazing work just bringing this together last year. Mummy! The dog is saying thank you. This is one now of 7, 8 town hall city events we've been having around the country, from Kettering, from Northampton, Bedford, Taunton, Manchester. We've got them planned in Brighton, we've got them planned in Derbyshire. Each of these events is bringing people together in a way that I've never seen before in a wildlife campaign like this. And I think it's because of the anger that this policy is causing. This badger cull has no sense. It doesn't make any sense on a scientific basis. It makes no sense on an economic basis. And it makes no sense in terms of animal welfare and wildlife protection at all. I've worked in and out of government and industry and farming for 30 years. I've never seen anything as bad as this. It's such a politically driven policy. It's got more holes than a Swiss cheese, and it's all based upon demonisation of the poor badger.
Hear, hear.
Okay, the badger has come out the fall guy for other people's mistakes, their incompetence, their negligence and their deceit. Let's be clear about that.
Yep.
Okay? And when people say to you this, when the farmers tell you that they have a problem with bovine TB, of course they have a problem with bovine TB. It costs us a lot of money as taxpayers too, and we should feel sympathy for them in terms of how they deal with this. But let's remember, the badgers got the disease from cattle.
Correct.
And they got that disease because of the intensive nature of our cattle systems today.
Right again.
The first case of bovine TB or TB in a badger was documented in 1971. There was cases before then, but what we started to see was a rapid rise, and that's not a surprise from the 70s onwards, as we had more intensive livestock systems in this country developed. We move 13 million cattle a year in Britain. That is more than anywhere else in the European Union. And we have terrible biosecurity in place. Despite improvements, which I'll talk about in a moment, it's still not good enough. In the last 6 years, we've moved 78 million cattle in Britain. But we've only ever had 24 investigations for TB fraud.
Shame.
And only 11 prosecutions in that time.
Shame.
And there are farmers that can alter the ear tags of cattle, can alter cattle passports,
yes,
can sell TB reactor cattle into the food chain when they shouldn't
yes,
be, and milk from TB reactors when they shouldn't be, and pass this disease around, and they know they're not going to get prosecuted, they know they're not going to get fines or go to prison as a result. And that basically is then ending up with the badger being persecuted and slaughtered for nothing. And that is not acceptable.
Hear, hear.
And then we have the mistakes of the past, and God knows we've had some bad mistakes in the past. The TB levels in our herd in this country prior to 2000 were relatively low. A few thousand cases a year, not comparably worse than most other European Union countries that had TB in their herds. But then we had a massive spike in 2001. Why did that happen? Because we had foot and mouth in this country. And I worked between MAF and the food industry at this time and could see a picture emerge that really should worry all of us. The National Farmers Union lobbied very hard, Tony Blair and the Labour government, against a vaccination policy to deal with foot and mouth in the herds of this country. The Chief Veterinary Officer, the Chief Scientist at the time, the support of the Prince of Wales, the Soil Association and other bodies had decided actually you could vaccinate those cattle. You could have slowed the transmission of that disease without destroying the national herd. But the National Farmers Union decided they didn't want to lose the export market for meat and dairy foods. They went to Tony Blair with the support of the food industry. They lobbied very hard and they turned the policy overnight on its head. And we destroyed the national herd in 2001. Millions of cattle, millions of sheep were destroyed. And then we shut down the countryside for almost 6 months. We delayed a general election. Yep. We spent in total nearly £8 billion. £2 billion compensating farmers for the lost cattle, and £6 billion plus because of the impact on the economy. And if that wasn't bad enough, the National Farmers Union then came back and said, we've got to restock cattle. We've got to move cattle back in to the areas of the country where farmers no longer have a viable business. And the Chief Veterinary Officer and the scientists concerned said, well, hold on a minute. The one area of the country where you've got a low level of TB, where you will be moving those cattle, has a very high level, foot to mouth has a very high level of TB. And you're going to have to put in test systems to stop the spread of that disease. But what did the NFU say? They said, don't worry about TB. All we care about is getting the herd back together again. Getting those farmers back in business. Getting those farmers paying their National Farmers Union dues, of course, as well. So what did we do? We moved hundreds of thousands of cattle with no TB systems in place, no checks, no control mechanisms, no testing at all for 2 years. And if you look at the figures, you will see that the disease rate for bovine TB in this country trebled between 2001 and into 2003. And it just didn't treble in the cattle, it trebled in the badger community as well, because we know it goes both ways between these species. So that incompetence, that negligence, was industrial pollution by the farming industry on wildlife never seen before in post-war Britain. And we basically have created a monster of a disease, and now the National Farmers Union is saying, well, we made a mistake, but oh no, we'll learn from that, but we must eradicate badgers as a consequence. That is not good enough.
Hear, hear.
That will not happen, and that should not happen. And then we come to this cull. The politics behind this cull. This is David Cameron's seat here. And we're here today because we want to make a statement. This is his cull. This is Cameron's cull.
Shame.
No bones about it.
Shame.
David Cameron, in opposition with his then Shadow Agriculture Minister Jim Pace, a farmer and a minister I knew well in government, cooked up this policy with the National Farmers Union. There were votes in this policy for the Conservative Party.
Shame.
In different areas of rural Britain. Farmers voted for them on this. Tory MPs were elected on this policy that are now sitting in the House of Commons supporting the crucifixion slaughter of our badgers as it stands at the moment. Let's be clear about that. It is criminal. And that was politics. That wasn't science-based. Okay? They did nothing illegal. The trade unions and the Labour Party have similar relationships and trade-offs. But that doesn't lead to the destruction of our wildlife in the way that this crazy policy is. The randomised badger cull that last Labour government did cost £50 million. It killed 11,000 badgers. Some of the most eminent scientists in the world, like Lord Krebs, who are no lovers of badgers, they're not sentimental about badgers, but what they wanted to do was a decent piece of peer-reviewed research that would really tell us once and for all as to whether killing these animals in this way would slow down the progression of this disease. And what did they find? They said it would make no major contribution at all, and in fact it could make it worse. Did the government listen? Did the Tories and David Cameron listen?
No.
I can tell you now, in 2009, when John Krebs and others finished that report, they took it to the Shadow Agricultural team. They took it to David Cameron and said, listen, if you're going to come into government, you need to read this and you need to think about your policy. Don't go down a culling route. It's not the right way to go. What did David Cameron say? Forget it. Throw that out the window. We've made a deal with the NFU and the farmers. We need the votes. We're going to go with a cull policy and forget the science.
Shame.
That's why John Krebs, that's why John Beddington, that's why Bob Watson, some of the most eminent scientists in this country are so angry about this policy because of the way it's been politicised. They've been pushed aside. And what we're doing is destroying wildlife for no good reason at all. And then we come to the cull. Why is it that we're subcontracting out the killing to the National Farmers Union? When there's ever been a cull, any research was undertaken by government officials. Good reason for that, because you're open to public scrutiny, both by Parliament and by the public. Okay, and that matters. But when you subcontract out to lampers and pest controllers, people, to be honest, of dubious background and character, to go around and killing our wildlife at night, intimidating and threatening people who want to peacefully protest against it, it's criminal. It is criminal. And it's wrong. Incompetent. Anyone who is free shooting badgers should have known from the start. If you speak to decent marksmen, and there are people out there that cull deer and others professionally for a living, and they will tell you this, that free shooting of badgers at night was always going to be difficult. You were never going to get the numbers. Badgers aren't daft. They're really sensitive animals. You go anywhere near a set, they're going to disappear quicker than David Cameron or Owen Patterson do when they have a difficult pressure. Down the hole, they're not going to come up. They're not going to come up. And that's what happened. 10 days into this cull, free shooting was the majority, 90% of the ratio. Civil servants in DEFRA had said to Owen Patterson, hold on a minute, guys, you should have split it 50-50, Minister, because if it doesn't work, free shooting, we're going to have to go to trap and shoot. What did Owen Patterson say? He said, no way, because if you do more than 10% trapping and shooting, it's going to cost more. And then I'm basically going to have to go to MPs and Parliament and the public and tell them why I'm actually spending as much trapping and shooting a badger than I would trapping and vaccinating a badger. Doesn't want to do that. So we go with the cheaper option, you push it to the NFU and let them get on with it. Well, it all went pear-shaped, didn't it? 10 days in, you had 90 dead badgers in both zones. Leaking like a sieve, DEFRA, disillusioned civil servants, mutiny. Panic in the ranks. What does Patterson do? You've got to get the cages out, guys, but we haven't got enough labour. We don't have enough people to lay the cages and actually get the badgers in there. These people have been going in, they've been putting the cages down, they've been shooting these badgers at point-blank range with shotguns. They're not even cleaning the cages between the kills. It's not being done professionally. The numbers have plummeted. The costs have gone sky high.
Shame.
The policing cost of this cull alone is around £4 million. The civil servant time, I can assure you, is probably over £1 million. And they talk about the Welsh Government wasting money on vaccination, when these guys have probably spent the best part of £5 million on 1,000 dead badgers. You tell me the logic in that. No logic whatsoever. No. And then you didn't test any of the animals either. You didn't test any of those badgers. And why didn't you test them? Well, we go back to the randomised badger cull. Two important issues. Firstly, the overall disease rate in the badger population from those 11,000 dead badgers. We found around 16.5%. But that disease was at a low level. It wasn't impacting the health of the badger. They would live their lives without showing any major negative health symptoms at all. And the risk of spread was actually quite low. They found 1.5% with the disease at a very progressed stage. That it was basically killing the badger and it was excreting the disease at a high rate. That's 1.5% of those 11,000 badgers. Okay? And that's why these guys are not testing those badgers, because they know they will get the same results again. Okay? And if you're going to spend £5 million on 1,500, 2,000 dead badgers, and then you're going to take it nationally, and you say you're doing that when there's only 1.5% of them actually have this disease, that's not going to wash for anyone.
Shame.
And when David Cameron, as he's repeatedly said, that we're doing badgers a favour by killing them because they're so diseased and ill. Hold on a minute, have I just missed something? 99% of those badgers have no major health problems at all, have no disease or have a very low rate of that disease. You have no right to destroy those animals. And let's think about it for a moment. Those animals have lived in this country for 300,000 years. There are sets around this area that go 500 years old, that go back to the Elizabethan period. Okay, we're not just talking about animals that have been brought in, like foxes, or we're looking at rabbits and other creatures that were not native to this country. Yes, we are talking about an animal that's been here for hundreds of thousands of years that has a protected status. And I want to come on to that protected status. I've had one hell of a week this week fighting in the media about the illegal killing of these badgers. I want to say thank you to Sky News who are here today. I want to tell you what happened last week. We went down to Secret World to film with Sky News, okay? We were filming a piece about the end of the cull and the possible extension. It would have been a minor item in the news, maybe 3 or 4 items down. It needed to be done. I gave up a day to go and do it. Isabel Webster comes back to me after she finished filming. She says, Dominic, I spoke to some farmers and they've admitted they're gassing badgers.
Shame.
And she said, you didn't know they were saying it when the camera was on and when the mic was on. And I said, I think, Isabel, you've got one of the biggest stories of this cull, okay? You need to go back and do some research. She went back and did it, and good credit to her and the team at Sky. They went back down to the West Country. They interviewed farmers off the record, as they had to because of legal restrictions to take that into account. But they found 14 within a day that admitted that they were gassing badgers. Okay? And not only are they gassing badgers, they're organising themselves into groups to gas badgers. They're sharing best practice to gas badgers. They're basically influencing government policy to gas badgers. This is criminal action. Now then, if you're an ex-colliery miner in the north and you're baiting badgers, quite rightly you can go to prison, and many have, and they should. And if you're a farmer and you're in this part of the world and you're killing badgers, you're given a green light from Owen Paterson and from Peter Kendall at the NFU. You're patted on the back. You're told, don't worry, guys, you're actually helping us get closer to a national cull policy. That's absolutely disgusting.
Resign.
And you know, when the question was put to Owen Paterson on Sky News, what's your reaction, Secretary of State, to our investigation of these 14 farmers? You know what he said? He said it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
He's unfortunate.
He didn't say it was illegal. He didn't say it was criminal. He said it was unfortunate. Yeah, it's unfortunate for him that this information had come to everyone's attention because he knows it's going on, and so does Peter Kendall and the NFU as well. We have a serious criminal conspiracy by farmers of this country to wipe out our wildlife that has been given the green light by this government and by the National Farmers Union.